Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily with some more breaking news as Bobby Wagner, maybe the best linebacker in the NFL, or at least right up there, Sam. He's going to sign with the rival Los Angeles Rams, a reported 5-year, $50 million contract for Bobby Wagner. We just mentioned him on yesterday's Daily, Sam, as one of the best free agents available, and here it is. It's happening. He's going to the Rams in a huge move. What was your initial reaction of Bobby Wagner going to the Rams?
Yeah, huge move. Obviously steals from Seattle, so anytime you can rob a division rival of a quality player, that's a good thing. But it also represents a real departure from what the Rams have done in the past few years in terms of allocation of resources. This is a team that has deliberately eschewed the idea of putting resource into the linebacker position. Haven't done it. They don't care. Like they've deliberately let linebackers walk away rather than pay them. They haven't gone after high impact, high value free agents. They haven't gone after high draft picks not that they have any high draft picks, but they haven't prioritized linebacker in the draft either. They've genuinely seen it as a position where you don't need to put money into it. You don't need to put resources into it. And as long as you have Aaron Donald up front wrecking things, as long as you have Jalen Ramsey on the back end and elite defensive backs, you're good. All of a sudden, we go and throw $50 million up to potentially 63, apparently, at Bobby Wagner. I mean, that is a major departure from what they've been doing.
Yeah, and Bobby Wagner at 32 years old, just about. So that was my initial takeaway too. You stole my initial takeaway, right? I mean, it's not like it's not obvious or anything, but yeah, the Rams very specifically have not invested at the linebacker position, and in fact, if you look at WAR and you kind of like tie it to dollar values, I won't get into the details of it, but the Rams roster last year was extremely valuable at pretty much every position. And they had the most valuable non-quarterback team that we've seen in PFF history back to 2006. But the two positions that did not provide essentially more dollar value was running back and linebacker, right? And it's almost like exactly how we would do it probably at PFF for the most part, right? If you were constructing a team, defensive line, secondary, everywhere else in the offense besides running back, really well done. And the Rams have, essentially purposely had late round draft picks, undrafted free agents. I mean, they've been obnoxiously conservative at linebacker. But I think there's another point to this that I'll circle back to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just going to make the point that at least running back for them had injuries last year. Like running back and linebacker both provided the sort of least value, surplus value relative to the investment. But running back, you can at least sort of point to an excuse and say, hey, Cam Akers blew out his Achilles just before the season. Darrell Henderson dealt with injuries. Like their top running backs were not healthy. Whereas linebacker, like that was the plan. They were rolling with the guys that they rolled with, and they just weren't very good.
Now, the other point I think that's fair to make here is I don't know that the Rams actually value interior defensive linemen. They just happen to have Aaron Donald, the most valuable one in the NFL, a guy that completely breaks that entire scale, whether you're looking at our grades or PFF WAR or surplus value, however you want to break it down. Aaron Donald is an elite player at that position. And I do know that teams, even teams that focus so much on positional value, still understand if you have a high-end player at a low-value position, there is an edge to be had. And I think that's just what they've decided to do here is essentially say, we're either going to have an undrafted free agent starting at linebacker or a third-round rookie like Ernest Jones, or we're going to have a guy that could be elite. And look, Bobby Wagner has absolutely been elite for the majority of his career. Now, it's also fair to point out, last year's grade was the worst one he had since 2015, third worst of his career, but it's another opportunity for the Rams to kind of swing for the fences and say, here's one of the best linebackers in the NFL. We think he'll be so good, he'll kind of offset the fact that maybe we don't value this position as much.
The other area I think that it has a chance to really impact is, remember last season, they moved Jalen Ramsey from outside perimeter corner inside. And one of the reasons they gave for doing that is it makes him harder to avoid for an offense. It involves him in more plays more naturally just by being more central where a lot of the action is, whether it's run game, whether it's pass game. It just puts him front and center relative to all the action. Now, if Jalen Ramsey's already inside and all of a sudden you're seeing guys like Darius Williams leave in free agency because you're not going to pay him the kind of contract that he's going to get in the open market, you're expecting the next guy to step up at corner, but those next guys are kind of unproven, untested, potentially unreliable, certainly not necessarily at the standard of guys like Darius Williams and before him, Troy Hill and Jalen Ramsey on the outside. So if you're going to have potential weaknesses on the outside, maybe the solution is to stock up on guys on the inside that can actually affect more things, that can influence other areas of coverage. So Jalen Ramsey's already across the middle, sort of expanding, manipulating coverage, expanding the area that he's dealing with and potentially shrinking the area that an outside corner has to deal with. If Bobby Wagner is now in the middle as well, doing likewise, sort of increasing the surface area of the field that he's able to cover and that is already dealt with. So all of a sudden, the cornerback responsibility is sort of shrinking, in terms of area that they have to cover little bit by little bit. And those kind of margins can be the difference between a corner struggling to keep his head above water against elite wide receivers and, holding his own.
It's a really good point, right? And the other thing I would add to that is the Rams are not just going to be static here, right? I mean, they had the defense in 2020, which was excellent, led by Brandon Staley, play that too high shell and just don't get beat deep. Last year, similar scheme. Raheem Morris is running it, added some wrinkles, adding Jalen Ramsey to the interior. But I think for the most part, teams have to attack the underneath area against this Rams defense, right? So now add Bobby Wagner, a guy that's really experienced playing zone coverage. And, to contrast this to the Seahawks defense of early last decade, they just ran the same thing over and over again. They never really adjusted, and the league started to figure it out. And the Rams seem like they're just continuing to move it forward, evolve this defense, and not have any weaknesses from front to back, whether it's the defensive line, linebacker, or in the secondary. So I think that's another move, and it's a reason for this move with Bobby Wagner. Now, it's a lot of money, and I think we have to look at this from the other angle too, right? Just because Bobby Wagner has been an awesome player for the majority of his career, we do have slight decline here over the last few years overall. Last year's coverage grade down a little bit. He's a good pass rusher. Maybe they do want to blitz a little bit. He's a good blitzer. So maybe they want to add that wrinkle too. But there is risk associated with this. It's a lot of money for an aging linebacker, and it is a position that the Rams have devalued and gotten good enough play from some lesser players, say, in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's also a position that isn't getting paid a ton generally at the moment. Like Devondre Campbell is coming off an all-pro season and signed for essentially the same value, right? 5 years, $50 million, coming off a season where he was a legitimate all-pro, and he's a lot, he's younger, he's in his prime. So if that's the kind of deal that essentially an elite level linebacker last season had, it does put that deal for Bobby Wagner into some context. Now, okay, Wagner has a much longer track record of being an elite player than Devondre Campbell does. On the other hand, he's also older and has just shown signs of decline. Sure, signs that you can excuse a little bit or explain away with the defense around him getting worse. But you're right, it's a lot of money, even if it ends up being a shorter deal, a shorter contract, a more front-loaded kind of deal. It is a lot of cash and a lot of resources to plow into a position. And the Rams are going to be one of those teams now constantly needing to evaluate or needing to make decisions about where they throw those resources, which players, which positions deserve those big money contracts.
Well, the Rams, I think it's a nice move. It'll probably really help, I think, at least over the next couple of years. Now, the pressure's still on their scouting staff because of what you're mentioning, right? The resources are getting a little bit tighter, both financially and from a draft pick standpoint. But I do like this strategy of, ballers at every level, right? Aaron Donald, you got Leonard Floyd up front as well. Now Wagner at linebacker, Ramsey on the back end. The Rams have done a really good job of getting their young safeties and their young linebackers to contribute just enough. Now you get the star power at every level. So, hey, the Rams are still all in. They're looking to repeat, and it's kind of a splashy third wave of free agency move. It's a lot of money for this point in free agency for a guy like Bobby Wagner.
And it just it reinforces what the strategy is this offseason for everybody, right? Contenders are not just sitting still, mostly. Contenders are continuing to add pieces left, right, and center. The Rams won a Super Bowl, and they've added Allen Robinson and Bobby Wagner in free agency. Okay, they've got losses as well, Odell Beckham, et cetera. But this is a team trying to get better coming off a Super Bowl. And they need to, because the AFC has just been an absolute warpath of adding superstars. There's a couple of teams that have sort of stood still and haven't necessarily done anything, but if you want to win a Super Bowl again as the Rams, you need to keep moving forward. And I think it's a good sign for them that they have done that.
Overall, I think my bottom line is it's added a ton of flexibility to this defense. You mentioned Ramsey moving around. I like Wagner as a blitzer. We saw what the Rams were able to do when they blitzed behind Aaron Donald, freeing him up. So the Rams have a lot more flexibility with Bobby Wagner. It's a lot of money, 5 years, $50 million, but they're getting one of the best linebackers in the league. It's the PFF NFL Daily.